Hello and welcome to The Last Word. On the day the CAG report on coal allocation brought Parliament to a standstill, we ask how serious or how mistaken are the CAG's charges, and do they amount to corruption or dithering and policy paralysis? That's with former Cabinet Secretary TSR Subramanian, former CAG and former Coal Secretary VN Kaul, the opinion editor of the Financial Express Sunil Jain, and the editor of the Hindu Siddharth Vardarajan. Siddharth Vardarajan, how do you view the CAG report on coal allocation? As an exposure of corruption to the tune of perhaps 1.86 lakh crore, or as an exposure of government dithering and policy paralysis which ensured that a decision to auction coal blocks taken in 2004 wasn't notified till earlier this year and still hasn't been implemented? Which is it?
I think from the standpoint of the ordinary citizen of India, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. The fact is that the government was given information, adequate notice was served that there are much better ways of allocating or selling this valuable resource of the people, and that advice was ignored willfully. The result is 186,000 crore rupees loss. Whether people made money on this, one can only speculate. I'm willing to wager that people did make money, but this is something that a criminal investigation would have to establish.
Okay.
But I do think that the government cuts a very, very sorry figure, Karan, because this is public money, money that the government is the custodian of, resources that the government is the custodian of, and in the wake of the 2G scam, to have another major expose of this kind, it does not look good for the government, and I think people are not going to give the government the benefit of the doubt on this.
Gentlemen, let's separate those two into two separate subjects and take them one by one so that the audience has the benefit of some analysis rather than confusion. And let's first, Mr. Subramaniam, focus on the 8-year delay in notifying the decision to auction coal blocks. The government says this was because the Law Ministry gave contradictory advice on 2 occasions, and secondly, because 4 coal producing states, 2 of them at the time ruled by the BJP, objected. In your eyes, is that a valid explanation or a poor excuse?
Well, let me start like this. As Siddharth said, this is a financial audit report. This is not a forensic report. They have come to the conclusion that loss has taken place. Whether they are right or they are wrong, time will tell. But that's the opinion of the CAG, which is entitled to. He has given facts and figures. Now, clearly, a forensic examination has to follow. That will have to determine 3-4 factors. One is the one that you mentioned just now. Was there sale of the blocks directly or indirectly at premium?
Forgive me, that wasn't my question. I'm coming back to my question because it's critical we stick to a structure. The government's explanation for the delay in auctioning is twofold. Let me just repeat it.
I don't think government can get the benefit of the doubt in this particular case because you can't dither for 8 years. Either you say I won't do it or you say I will do it, number one. Number two, you give notice to the general public that the auction is going to take place soon. Jump in and come and get the allocations there. So I think only a forensic examination will determine the answer to your question.
Sunil Jain, given that coal is a major mineral which comes under central government control, the BJP argument is that the central government should have A, overridden the state's objections, and secondly, that it could easily have resolved the contradictory advice it was getting from its own Law Ministry. And the BJP says that given that the government didn't do either of these two things, it therefore follows that it wasn't serious about auctioning and the 2004 decision was just a charade. Do you buy that line of criticism? I'm afraid Sunil Jain can't hear us. Very quickly, let me put that to you as a former CAG and also as a former Coal Secretary. Do you buy that line of question?
Well, the delay, I wouldn't overplay the delay at the moment because I am very much interested in this report going to the PAC for the simple reason that all audit reports require slow thinking, deliberate and rational. They can't be disposed of by this fast, emotional, intuitive thinking. And that is what is happening today. We don't know how that time period of 6 years was spent. Now, I don't know, that the law had to be amended. people had to be consulted, the states have to be consulted. You can't, central government cannot overrule states in matters of mining because all the mines are located in the states.
In other words, you're suggesting that the 8-year delay may not be a exaggerated delay or deliberate prevarication. There may well be good reasons that explain it.
Absolutely.
Therefore, the criticism that the government deliberately delayed doesn't necessarily follow.
It is not proved yet.
It is not proved yet.
Yes.
Therefore, it's only an argument being put forward by the CAG.
It's the opinion of the CAG, and I think we should not rush to judgment. Okay. These reports should go to the PAC, and the PAC must deliberate in great detail. And there are two other issues here.
I'll come to the other issues in a moment's time. Let me now go back to Sunil Jain. Sunil Jain, the CAG also claims that allocation of coal blocks by means of the select committee process lacked transparency and was arbitrary. But it's absolutely the case that the coal-producing states were themselves involved in this process. Some of them at the time were BJP ruled. Secondly, the allocation was made in many cases on the recommendations of those states. Thirdly, none of the states objected to the process and all of them were satisfied. So therefore, does the CAG charge of lacking transparency and being arbitrary hold? And secondly, if it does hold, can you blame just the UPA? Should you not also blame all the states involved?
You know, Karan, it is obviously true. You know, as the Congress party has been saying, that there have been opposition states who are part of that screening committee. But I think, you know, we're carrying this a bit too far. There are times when the government doesn't listen to the opposition at all on anything, and there are times when it now suddenly swears by the federal, you know, part of the constitution and says that we have to listen to what the opposition says. So I think, you know, there are a bit of double standard there. I think the most important thing we have to keep in mind is that there was a screening committee. The screening committee was headed by the coal secretary. We had people who were not even, people of great repute. They were just basically people interested in trading those licenses away out there. So the government did not get into auctions, but forget about auctions for the moment. The fact is that the process of allocating those licenses were not transparent. They were not the best of people who were given to. You can't blame the fact that there were two BJP people. I mean, I think the BJP chief ministers should have been proactive. There's no doubt about that. But you can't blame the BJP chief ministers for not being proactive. And you can't say the government has an excuse.
Forgive me, I'm going to correct you there because I think this is a matter of accuracy that I should point out. It's not just that BJP chief ministers weren't proactive. Two BJP chief ministers wrote letters specifically saying they objected to the auction process. They wanted to continue with the select committee process. Those were Raman Singh of Chhattisgarh and Vasundhara Raje Scindia of Rajasthan, both of whom were at par at the time. So let's leave that aside. Let's move now from this.
Can I get to that?
Very quickly.
It is the same BJP which in the year 2000 also brought in an amendment to the Coal Nationalization Act, which said that we should have auctions and we should have not just captive users but even commercial mining should be allowed.
Sunil Jain, I don't want to get lost in the details of what the BJP did. All I'm asking is, can you blame the UPA alone for the lack of transparency when clearly that was something that the BJP and other people supported? But let's move beyond the first issue, which is this 8-hour delay, and let's come to the core issue, which is the charge of corruption. Siddharth Varadarajan, there's no doubt that whilst the government deliberately postponed implementing auction, it also simultaneously went on an allocation binge. Some 140 coal blocks were allocated, and every one of the recipients knew that what he was getting would increase in value substantially once auctions had become the means and norm for allocating blocks. But the question is this: does all of this amount to proof of a corrupt deal or a corrupt nexus between the decision makers and the coal allottees?
Karan, all you and I can do is speculate. Investigating agencies, however, would be well advised to correlate, for example, the growth in assets of individuals connected to this entire process and allocations made during this period. There's plenty of criminal forensics that can be done, accounting forensics that can be done. The CAG is not equipped to do that. What the CAG has done as a watchdog is to point to colossal losses, which cannot be explained away by repeating the mantra that we are adhering to policy. Right? So I think this is a very good case, and I fully agree with the thrust of your questioning about this is not a, it would be a pity if this were to be, if this were to get mired in UPA versus BJP politics, because the fact is that rent seeking on the basis of the right to decide who gets control over the assets of resources that the people of India collectively own is something that politicians in power, whether they belong to the BJP or the Congress, all indulge in. And I think a robust investigation by the CBI under the direct tutelage of the Supreme Court of India is what can help establish who gained out of this, if anybody.
You're now becoming prescriptive. Let's not be prescriptive. I'd prefer us for today to stay analytical. Let me put it like this. The government's explanation for what a moment ago I called a binge of allocation is that Coal India couldn't meet the growing demand, and if that demand wasn't met, the economy and growth would suffer. Therefore, allocations had to happen. But the problem is that of the 57 allocations made to private sector companies, 56 have not produced a thing. Doesn't that in a real sense undermine the government's justification for these allocations?
It does. It also undermines it because yesterday, day before we heard the news, we're going to import large quantities of coal from US when India has 200, 500 years reserve of coal. Coming to your specific question and following what Siddharth said, I think the only practical way to proceed, I'm not giving prescription, is these 56, the whole 142, on a case-by-case, is a spreadsheet. How many applicants were there for each? And why was it given to A or B? What was the qualifications, each one? Then where the share sold, where the asset sold, if so at what premium, and what happened to those. If you get that immediately, within 1 month, a good technical team can do that. You'll get a clear picture immediately what happened. And the suspicion is a lot of not millionaires, a lot of billionaires have been created.
Very possibly, but both Siddharth Varadarajan and Mr. Subramaniam are now being forensic and going through a prescriptive process to establish, or to try and establish, that the people who got allotments and who haven't as yet produced a thing got it for the wrong reasons. I want to go back to that key question that must have faced the CAG. You've been a CAG right up till 2008. Can the CAG simply say that if a lot of people got allotments but haven't been able to produce a thing, there must have been some corrupt nexus between the decision makers and the allottees, and therefore I believe this is corruption? Because there is a difference between corruption and simple failure to produce.
Mismanagement and corruption. Well, I would say that the CAG can certainly say that, because unless he says that, he must be allowed, he's independent and must be allowed to speak with full-throated ease on these issues. We should not object to CAG exaggerating or saying things like that. That's besides the point. The point is he's highlighted a very important issue, the dysfunctionality in the coal sector. And I think it is well within his rights to do that. But it is also very important that we don't rush to judgment on these things.
Absolutely. This is why I began with that carefully phrased question to Siddharth Varadarajan. Does the CAG report highlight dysfunctionality, dithering policy paralysis, which is one set of issues, or does it amount to corruption, which actually is a different issue? Because a government can be dysfunctional and incompetent without being corrupt. Let him answer, I'll come back to you.
CAG will not prima facie should come up with the corruption charge.
It shouldn't prima facie.
It's not his job.
No, he can. If he comes across blatant corruption, he can say it. But it is not his primary concern. May not be his job or not job, but it is not his primary concern. His primary concern is to see that things are done faithfully, with wisdom and with economy.
Very quickly, Sunil Jain, I want to also come to the CAG's figure of 1.86 lakh crore presumptive loss. First of all, it's based on coal profitability in the year 2001 and the assumption that that profitability would have applied in 2005, 2006 and 2007, which many people dispute. Secondly, it's based upon the assumption that something like 73% of coal in the mines can be extracted, whereas Coal India operates on the basis of something closer to 42-45% extraction. And thirdly, the CAG has not discounted future revenue streams to arrive at net present value. If you did make that discount, the value could diminish by anything as much as 50-60%. So the key question is this: how meaningful is that figure of 1.86? And if that figure of 1.86 lakh is substantially reduced for legitimate reasons to something closer to just 40, 50, 60,000 crore, then the report loses its, in quotes, sexiness.
Karan, you're absolutely right. I suspect, by the way, you've taken you've taken some of your figures from my editorial, so I'm going to claim credit for that. But more seriously, there is a problem with CAG reports, that the CAG, it's highlighting the problem, which is very, very important. I don't think anybody would have looked at the 2G scam had it not been for the CAG's 1.76 lakh crore number. So there is that very important thing. But that said, I think, when you look at that 1.86 lakh crore and you discount it, we had done the discounting when we wrote the editorial, you come to a figure of about 70,000 crores. Similarly, when the CAG talks about the dial scandal, they say it's 88,000 crores. Of course, in this case, the CAG does the NPV, and they say the NPV is 4,000 crores. So it is very important. I think that's a lesson for future CAG reports, that those reports have to be, shall we say, journalistic proof or journalist proof. They have to match, they have to be simple. That, this was the revenue over 20 years. This is what it boils down to. I think what the CAG is right now doing, it's playing around with too many figures, which is creating a problem. As I said, the CAG is highlighting the problem, but the figures can be interpreted in 5 different ways. The CAG needs to figure out a way to deal with that. So far, it has not dealt with that.
All right.
You're absolutely right. The 1.86 lakh crore figure is an exaggeration by, I think, about 50%.
Sunil Jain, I'll give you credit for your editorial, although I'll add that unfortunately I didn't get to read it. My lapse, I should have read it. I was actually relying upon figures that were put across by your rivals, the Economic Times and the Business Standard. But it clearly shows all financial journalists come to the same conclusion. Let's take a break at that point and come back and look at the political ramifications of the CAG report. Does it really amount to a legitimate demand by the opposition that the Prime Minister must resign even before they're prepared to discuss the matter? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to The Last Word. We're discussing the CAG report on coal allocation, which held up Parliament today. Siddharth Varadarajan, the CAG report is not a simple, straightforward matter. Both the centre and the states were involved in making allocations through the select committee method. Both of them were involved in postponing the auction. And the calculation of loss, as Sunil Jain explained at the end of part 1, is extremely controversially, if not also very poorly done. And then, of course, the other big thing is that none of the private sector companies have actually made any money or profit so far. So, is this an issue on which, at this early stage, the BJP should be demanding the Prime Minister's resignation and insisting that they won't even discuss it until he resigns?
It's silly. The demand for the Prime Minister's resignation on this issue is silly. And I think Parliament, people vote for their MPs in order to have an informed discussion about burning issues of the day, and you have a CAG report, and I think rather than disrupting the House in the pursuit of a demand for resignation, which incidentally, they keep demanding opposition. I mean, it's not as if the Congress wasn't doing it earlier either, but I don't think this is why people of India vote for their MPs. They want discussion. So let the CAG's report be debated. Let's hear what the government has to say. Let the BJP give its explanation on behalf of Raman Singh or Shivraj Chauhan or Scindia, but Vijayaraja Scindia, why they pressed for certain companies to be given coal allocations and oppose the auctions. So let there be a debate. But I think this idea that something happens, bomb blast, somebody should resign, it's fine for rhetoric for one day. But if you're going to disrupt Parliament for the whole session on the basis of your demand for resignation, I'm sorry, this is not why Parliament exists. I think let's have a discussion, let's have a debate.
Now, the position the BJP took in both houses today is that they will not hold a discussion, and ironically, the government was prepared to break with convention and go ahead and discuss the report, even though it hasn't been so far commented upon by the PAC.
They had 2 months to study it, and BJP had 2 days to study it, number 1. Number 2 is...
Okay, hang on a moment. Forgive me. If they've only had 2 days to study it, how can they demand the Prime Minister's resignation? Is that justified when you haven't studied the report? This report comes, as Siddharth said, after 4 major scams. But let's go back to the main point now. This is clearly political grandstanding
which is completely justified and permitted. They want to bring to the notice of the people that this is not an isolated case. This is the fourth or fifth.
And this is the best way of bringing it to the notice of the people?
Obviously, it is one way.
Hamstringing Parliament?
It's not for you to decide, it's for them to decide. But they have brought it to the notice.
For us to comment on?
But Karan, you said that they want to bring this issue. Was it deliberate incompetence or was it corruption? It could be deliberate incompetence for corruption also. That is one factor. You don't look at it, and that is what they are highlighting now.
Let me raise, Mr. Kaul, with you an issue that I had the benefit of hearing during the commercial break, which the audience didn't, but I think it's an important point which I'll raise now. And this is to do with this figure of 1.86 lakh crore. You said to me during the commercial break that this is actually an opportunity lost rather than a loss to the exchequer.
Absolutely.
Explain that a little, because that puts a different perspective on the matter.
Look, in the 2G report also, I think, this technique of working out assumptions, and based on assumptions you come to a figure of loss. Now, I call that opportunity cost auditing. Now, the CAG's establishment is perfectly, I would defend the right of the CAG to give a figure as large as that. Earlier on, the first figure was 10.6 lakhs or some crores. Now it is 1.86 lakhs of crores. We should not, sort of laugh at that figure, because these figures are important. They are based on assumptions, and those assumptions are best tested by an economist. Opportunity cost determination is not something that auditors
But I just want to pick up on one thing. This is opportunity cost, not actually necessarily loss to the exchequer.
Yes, absolutely.
And therefore the CAG should be clear that that figure refers to opportunity cost, not loss.
Not loss.
Very quickly, Sunil Jain, something that's emerged from this last point made by Mr. V. N. Kaul, and hopefully through this discussion as a whole, is that the CAG report is not just a simple, not just a difficult, complicated matter, but one that the press has difficulty trying to portray and comprehend in its fullness. Many elements of the press pick on just one aspect. The allegation of corruption end up distorting the report. But if you pick up on all the elements, it probably becomes too confusing and complicated. Is this a very difficult issue for us to handle?
Well, I mean, there are clearly cognitive limits to mere journalists, and Justice Karju will tell you we're full of them. But, I want to take up the point that, Mr. Kaul has raised, and, the point that I made earlier about there being assumptions. There are obviously huge assumptions that the CAG makes, but let's get it very clear that 1.76 lakh crore assumption in the case of 2G has been more or less vindicated by the government of India, when the cabinet has now said that I want a 14,000 crore minimum
Except I should add,
price.
I should add, that doesn't mean to say it will be vindicated in the Kaul case. The two are separate. You can't jump from one to the other.
Yeah. No, I know. But I'm saying that we haven't done the vindication in Kaul yet. But I'm saying in 2G, which is what we laughed at some time back, they seem to be vindicated. But I want to make a larger point.
Very quickly, because we're out of time. Very quickly.
Yes, very, very quickly. I think let's forget about the fact as to whether the government, this is a criminal delay or not. Let's cancel those licenses of people who haven't produced, which is 56 out of 57. I think let's allow commercial mining. We've got a bill by the BJP which is still waiting in Parliament. With this
Sunil Jain, forgive me. You're now becoming prescriptive. You cease to be analytical, but I will point out one simple thing, that in fact 14 of those allotments have already been cancelled.
After the report.
And I also believe...
After the report.
No, not after the report. Before the report. Before.
After the draft report.
And secondly, that the CBI is also carrying out a preliminary investigation at the behest of the CVC. Maybe, in fact, more will emerge, but let's end this discussion there. I want to just leave the audience with one thought. This report is a complicated one. It is not a simple one. Beware of how you approach it, because people can distort it by simply highlighting one element without giving you the full picture. But the problem with the full picture is that it's not easy to comprehend and certainly not easy to explain. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.